Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Faith Watson. I am the Director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. One of the best skills that an instructor could have is the ability to design exams that promote learning. Imagine designing an exam that help your students to review the course material, learn from each other, and at the same time reduce their test anxiety and improve their overall course performance. Well, our guest today, Christine Witkowski, will be providing us with some strategy to do so. Christine, welcome.
Thank you, Firm Faith.
We're so glad to have you, and I'm going to open the floor to you for a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Great, thank you. Well, I joined the faculty of the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences just this past fall after 10 years as professor and program coordinator of environmental science at Middlesex Community College in Connecticut. And prior to that, I was an adjunct for 5 or 6 years. So I've had a lot of teaching experience, and I'm particularly interested in finding ways to reach the diverse students in introductory classes. I really enjoy that challenge, especially. I did spend 2 years serving as the coordinator of our Center for Teaching at Middlesex as well. So I'm always looking for strategies to improve the learning experience, especially at the introductory level.
Great, and we're so glad to have you here at Murray State as a faculty. And I'm looking forward really to delving deeper into this conversation with you today, Christine.
Okay.
So the strategies that you'll be sharing with us today, could you help us understand what impressed you to start using these strategies and how have they worked for you?
Well, when I first started teaching, I felt very challenged when it came to giving exams. And I know that that's true for many people when they start out teaching, because we don't get good training in that. So my very first exam, I was an adjunct, and I gave my very first exam, and I was shocked and dismayed when I graded them, and most of my students failed it. And I really started to question why that was, because, I mean, obviously you could say, well, they just didn't study, the students, need to do better, but I didn't really feel that that was likely to be the full explanation. And so I wanted to understand that better. I knew I didn't have any kind of experience or knowledge about writing good exams. So that was really the impetus. And I was lucky enough at the time to be at an institution where they had a good faculty development center and worked with, even with myself as a first-time adjunct, they were very quick to respond to my urgent questions about what to do. And so I started really exploring the possibilities of how to do better exams. And for me, the turning point came when I recalled my time as a graduate student. I had heard a talk by a professor who was using what he called cooperative or pyramid exams in his large introductory oceanography courses. And so I went back and looked into what he had done with that. And I started experimenting with these cooperative exams. And that involved, in his approach, giving a standard exam first. And then after that, having the students form groups and do a second part of the exam using some or all of the questions, but answering the questions working together. And that would become a part of the grade, 25%, 30% of their exam grade. So I used that as my inspiration, and I approached it that way initially, and then I ended up adapting it over time the more I did it, and I ended up switching it around. And now what I do for these cooperative exams is I actually give the quote unquote group exam first, and that's worth 30% of their exam grade. And then after they've worked together in groups, then they get the individual exam where they work by themselves, close notes, close books, and that's worth 70%. And I've adopted that approach for pretty much all of my courses, and I have found that to be extremely successful on a number of levels, and I would never go back to just giving an individual exam. It's been tremendous.
Mm-hmm. So you put them in groups first,
Mm-hmm.
and then so how do you organize the groups? So I'm just trying to picture how it actually works.
Yes, I feel it is very important to organize good groups, and so that takes a little bit of effort to think about the students that you have, and of course in bigger classes you might have less ability to kind of pick and choose who you put together, but for smaller classes you can assign them to groups. I always let them know ahead of time that I will assign the groups. They can't just come in trusting that their smart friend is going to do all of the work. They don't know who they're going to work with until that day. So they all have to come in prepared. And so then I'll give them their group assignments when they arrive, and they'll sit down with their group mates. And I do change those groups with each exam. So I tell students at the beginning, if you don't like your group, if you feel like you had, someone who was mooching off of you and you're upset about it, you'll be with different people the next time and the next time. So I rotate them through in different groupings, and that generally works very well.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you. Some instructors tend to let students decide, how, okay, you're going to be in groups, right? And then part of your grade is going to involve the group grade, and part is going to be based on what you did. Have you ever thought of having the students give some say into that percentage in terms of the weighting? Or you decide that?
Yeah, I experimented with it a little bit, and I asked students what they thought was fair. And I don't think I opened it up initially as an open question to let them decide, but it was initially a conversation that I had with students as I was experimenting. And I think the feedback I get now is that they feel it's fair. And my experience with looking at the grade distribution is that it's not such a high percentage that I feel they're artificially inflating their grade. Because in truth, some students certainly can benefit from working with somebody who's, more prepared than they are. So I don't want that percentage to be too high.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the students seem to feel it's fair. It does give a boost to their grade, but it's not such a big boost that it's too much.
Yeah. And I think what I like about this strategy, I really like it. I think what I like about it is the opportunity for students to learn, because really the grade is just a means to an end. Right. And this strategy, to me, it gives the impression that what you are interested in is the students learning.
Yes. Yes. And I love the group exam experience, because as I walk around and listen to them talking to each other, these exams are just so engaging. They're all talking to each other. It's very rare that you have someone just sitting there writing answers down. So as an instructor, it's very gratifying to hear them explaining things to each other. And I always emphasize, as I explain to students how this works initially, just how much you benefit from trying to explain something to another person. That's a very positive learning experience. They also learn in other ways too. They see how their classmates are taking notes, because I allow them in their group exam to use their notebooks and use whatever work we've done together in class. So sometimes they learn some study skills. They see, well, gee, my notes are not as good as that person's notes, and look at how nice those notes are set up and how quickly he or she can find the answer. So there are lots of skills they learn from doing this as well that are really valuable.
So I'm just trying to picture you telling them the benefit of this, because this is a novel experience for many of them. They probably didn't experience anything like this before. Right. So for someone that's listening and they're wondering, how do you tell students the benefit of this? Because my grade is going to be split between this group experience and what I do. So you tell them, yes, you can learn from your peers. You can really notice some strategies that your peers do. What else do you tell them are the benefits?
I definitely emphasize the fact that it's giving them an opportunity to review material, fill in gaps. Maybe they didn't realize they had missed something. Maybe they got distracted and missed some material in class. So by going through this process, they're reviewing together, finding where they're missing information, filling in gaps. Maybe they say to one of their peers, oh, can I borrow your notes for, this class that I missed? I need to review this. So they really have an opportunity to thoroughly review. And I always say, even if the group exam, the grade on the group exam doesn't bring up your individual exam mathematically, what I do is, if the group exam is lower, maybe they just didn't plan their time very well and the grade is lower than they ultimately get on the individual exam, I always tell them that I'll throw out the group exam grade if it's lower. It's not going to hurt their grade. So they love that. But
wow,
then
I like that.
Yeah, and then
it's
I
like
say,
a win-win situation.
Right. But then I also emphasize that even if the group exam grade was lower, it's probably helping you increase your individual grade because you had that review time and you sat with the information more. I emphasize that this ensures that they look at the material before midnight the night before the individual exam. They need that extra time to absorb information. So all those things.
Yeah, I think that's one way in which it reduces their anxiety, right? Because you're saying, hey, don't worry. If you don't do so well, we can just eliminate this grade. But how do you balance them thinking, okay, well, it doesn't really matter because she's going to eliminate this grade? I mean, if it doesn't work out.
Well, I find that they really work at it because they know the potential is there for it to increase their grade. And it usually does. There are some cases where it doesn't, and then I just drop it. But they really want those extra points, and they know that if they do the work together, they're going to learn something from each other. At least after the first time they do it, I think they see that. And the feedback I get in course evaluations really underscores how positive the experience is for most of them. There's always a few, who are resistant to any kind of group work and they'd rather just take an exam, a regular exam. There's always one or two, but the vast majority say this is fantastic.
Yeah, because I wondered about that. I know you said earlier that they think it's fair, but I just wondered what other response you were really getting in terms of this whole experience, in terms of, or they saying, they were just saying it was a great experience?
Yes.
They specifically...
I get a lot of comments on evaluations about what a unique experience it is, what a positive experience it is, what they learned from other people about, with the skills I mentioned. So I've just had so much positive feedback on it that I feel like it works very well, especially with those intro courses where you have a really diverse group of students that really could learn a lot from each other.
Right. And I imagine that in turn, the next semester you could say, last semester, the students enjoyed this. So you could actually use your past experience to promote it the next semester.
Oh, absolutely. And I do get the feeling too that students, they tell each other, oh, I have this class where I have these really crazy exams, but the word spreads and people come in looking for that experience.
Wow. I feel like I could have been in that class. So this seems almost like a fairy tale strategy. I imagine that there are no challenges associated with this.
Well, no, that is not the case. There are definitely challenges. So of course, the obvious one is the amount of time this takes, because instead of just giving one exam, now you've really got two exams. Usually I take 2 class periods to do it. If you do have a class that meets only once a week, and I have had that case, I still do the group exam, but in that situation, they have the group exam first, and then they take a break, and then they go into the individual exam. So the review benefit is still there, but it's not as powerful as if you have a class that's split. Most of the time, it's a class that meets 2 or 3 times a week, and then you have them on different days. So you have to make room in your schedule to allow for that extra exam time. So at first it might be uncomfortable because maybe you're not covering quite as much material, but I do feel strongly that yes, I could cram in more material if I spent less time on the exams, but how much more did they learn from cramming in extra material versus how strong the learning experience is with the extra exam time? I really am able to ensure that they learned what we did cover because they go through the group exam. So that is the initial challenge, finding a little bit of extra space for the exams. The other challenge is that you do, the way I do it is I create a different exam for the group exam. It's not multiple choice, true, false. I create discussion questions. So it does take some time to develop those exams that work the best in a group setting to encourage them to look for information and not just, pick an answer from a multiple choice list. So that took some time initially, and I modify those pretty regularly. But once you get the format down and the number of questions, you get a sense of what works. Then it's easy, and then you've got these exams, and usually you have a few versions, and the time invested isn't that great. So there's an initial time investment there.
Right. And I'm glad that you shared that, because I think that, like anything, when you start, it always goes a bit slower. And as you develop that muscle, it really gets easier.
Yes.
So, yeah. But would you say, help us understand, who should really be using this strategy? Does it really lend itself to most courses?
Well, my experience, of course, is in the sciences and geoscience, and the person who inspired me to do this also is in the geosciences. I have uploaded a reference that your listeners can share, can look at, and it's in the Journal of Sociology. So I know it's been done in other fields, and it seems to me that this could be a great strategy really for anyone giving exams that, especially that have any kind of problem component or discussion component. It seems like you could adapt this in a number of ways for really any discipline. As I said, my experience with it has been in a lot of my intro courses, but I've used it in more advanced courses as well. So I have not found a situation for myself where I didn't feel it was appropriate.
Right. So for someone who, resonated with what you shared, what would you say to that person who is a little bit hesitant? What would be some first steps that this person could take?
I think a good way to start is to do it the way I started and the way it was initially proposed, where the group exam or cooperative exam happens after the individual exam. So that doesn't really take any effort to develop at all. You just have to find some time in the schedule to allow that to happen. But in that case, you would just give them the opportunity to redo some or all of the questions that you already have in your exam, but doing it working together. So that doesn't require any development of additional questions.
Okay.
And then you may decide that that works great and keep it that way. And that's how Dr. Uritich does. This is at the University of Massachusetts. He's the one who inspired it. And that's how he always does his. So that might work. But if you like the review aspect, that's why I switched it. Because you often get students who say, are you going to do a review? And then they come and they just sit and look at you and wait for you to lecture again and go through everything on the exam. And that's not a good learning experience. So I found that when they ask for a review, I explain, the group exam is a great review and they're satisfied. So you could do it either way, but the really easy way to see how powerful this experience is just let them redo some or all of the exam working together.
So I imagine a viewer might be thinking, your students ask for review and you say to them, well, the group exam is a great opportunity for review. Is that basically what you tend to do in the class, or do you ever do any with them on your own?
I do not have any kind of review session because any of the reviews that I've attempted have been, really just repeats of what I would do anyway. If I'm trying to make it engaging, it's like another class. I guess I've never found the value in it. It's most of the time they're very passive.
Yeah.
But I do give them a study guide ahead of time, which lists all of the objectives for each module so that they can come to the group exam at least prepared with making sure they have all the material ready for what's covered. So they do have that study guide.
I really like that. And I remember when I was a graduate student, one of the best class that I took, the instructor, she didn't necessarily give us a study guide or anything. She gave us objectives. Yes. And she said to us, if you are able to really master these objectives, you will do well in the exam.
Yes.
So that way the students are now focused on the objectives. Because I've seen students who receive study guide, receive even a review from the instructor, and even the questions that were discussed in the review. When the discussion was, or during this discussion, the students were saying, will the exam questions be like this? Will it be like this? So they were focusing on, will it be like this?
Right.
Instead of focusing on what are the objectives that we are trying to master here. So I
Yes.
like the fact that, you know, you're giving them objectives, which is good, that they could actually in turn focus on in the review.
Yes.
So thank
I
you.
actually give them the objectives as each week that we cover the topic, they get the objectives right at the beginning when they do their reading. I don't think most of them pay much attention to the objectives at that stage, but then I bring them together into the document that that I call a study guide. And so then they start to get serious about what are the objectives.
Exactly. So, wow, you have shared so much, some really practical tips with us today. And I know you mentioned one resource earlier. Could you just review that resource and tell us if there are any others that you'll be sharing with our viewers?
Yes, I listed 2 websites that have just a short description of how a few different people have used this in their classes. And they are all examples in the sciences, because that's what I'm most familiar with. There's also the journal reference from sociology that I mentioned. And there's also on one of the websites, there's also a journal article by Dr. Richard Uretich. And he's the oceanographer that inspired me. So there's also a journal reference about how he does his cooperative or pyramid exams. So there's 3 there.
Yeah, excellent. So viewers, I will be linking to those resources in the video description below. So I encourage you to check those out. And so in the final minute or so, could you leave our viewers with a call to action?
Well, as I said earlier, I think a great way to try this is just, give them a chance to work in groups to redo the exam that you've already got. You can do that with very little effort. But I would invite you to get in touch with me and just chat with me further about the details of this. I'm happy to share samples of my exam so you can see what I mean by the different questions that I use. I love to talk about things like this and share my experiences. And I have worked with colleagues in the past who successfully implemented some version of cooperative exams with great success. So I'm really excited to share this with any of my colleagues here at Murray State. So I hope you'll get in touch and we can talk further.
Wow, that's a very generous call to action. Thank you so much. Viewers, you should take her up on that. That was very generous of her to offer her time. Obviously, she likes what she does.
I do.
Well, Dr. Witkowski, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And viewers, I encourage you to share this conversation with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.